By the time you hear this, I will have had, at long last, my 50th birthday. And I suspect that I'll feel pretty much the same way then that I feel now at 49. However, I solicited questions in honor of the occasion, and as ever, you, the listeners of the John Huff Podcast, have delivered in veritable spades. And what is it that you would like a 50-year-old writer, drummer, podcaster to tell you? Well, what's the funniest thing I've ever seen? What's the best advice I've ever been given? What have I learned about myself as a drummer and podcaster? Would I try stand-up comedy? What is my go-to celebratory cocktail? Poignant questions all, and I'll be trying to answer them, along with many more, on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. I think the best thing to do is just jump right in, kids. I got a lot of interesting questions. I got some heavy ones. I got some fun ones. I have only so much time to get through them. I'm going to do as many as I can, hopefully in an entertaining and inspiring and insightful way. First question comes to us from our old pal, Wes S. Good old Wes S. And he asked me a couple of good ones. The first one is, what's the funniest thing you've ever seen? Now, I loves a laugh, kids. I have always loved a laugh. And how do you answer the question? What's the funniest thing you've ever seen? I mean, I've been on this planet for 50 freaking years. I've seen some funny stuff, man. And of course, it's all very subjective. So my answer to the question is, well, I'm not really going to answer that question. I'm going to answer what have I laughed the hardest at. And I racked my brains thinking, what have I laughed the hardest at? And the answer to that question, kids, is the Mr. Creosote scene in Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. You know the Mr. Creosote scene, right? That is when Terry Jones is the enormously obese man, like beyond, like cartoonishly obese man, who goes into the restaurant and he orders one of everything. It is horrendous. All right. It is. If you've not seen it, I don't know how you've not seen it, but it is an absolutely horrendous piece of cinema where this man eats and eats and eats. There is, I mean, the endless gag is the freaking vomiting. And legend says that filming the scene was so awful that the extras on set, some of them were actually throwing up for real at how disgusting this scene is. It is, to put it mildly, offensive and iconic. And it is the thing that I can remember that I laughed hardest at in my whole freaking life. And I was probably about 17 when I saw it. I was at my boy Clugger's place and we watched it on TV. And I had not seen it before. And we had familiarity with the Holy Grail, of course, the great, great Arthurian legend send-up that Python did. And I love freaking Monty Python, by the way. You know, if I was asked the question, you could take 3 TV DVD sets with you on a desert island, I think Monty Python's Flying Circus would be one of them. And we watched The Meaning of Life, and it came to this scene, and I was about 17, and I nearly asphyxiated. I nearly suffocated from laughter. Like there was a moment where we were kind of hanging on a precipice. We were kind of hanging on the edge of whether I was going to suffocate from laughter at this scene. And maybe it was just my mentality at the time and the moment and whatever, but it struck me so freaking hard that I was literally on the floor with my face turning purple from freaking laughter. Have you ever seen the cartoon? Of course you have. The Bugs Bunny cartoon where Bugs Bunny is the opera conductor and he's conducting the singer and like the really arrogant opera singer. And he puts his glove up in the air and he makes the opera singer hold that really high note and just hold it and hold it and hold it. And he's on the ground, beating the ground with his face turning purple and his clothes pop off and the whole opera house collapses and he will not let go of this note. That was me laughing at the Mr. Creosote scene in Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, okay? So I don't know if that's the funniest thing I've ever seen, but it is the thing I have laughed hardest at in my life. And I watched it recently because it came up in conversation. And you know what? Still the funniest thing probably that I've ever seen. And it is awful. Please do not get me wrong. If you have not seen this and you are of a delicate constitution, maybe best to avoid. But if you are just slightly twisted, like your boy here, freaking hilarious and awful. So that's probably the funniest thing I've ever seen, okay? Now, Wes also asked a really interesting one. He said, what's the coolest thing you've ever seen from the air? From the air, what's the coolest thing you've ever seen? And that is an interesting thought. Now, I've been lucky enough to fly around quite a bit, and I've seen some cool stuff. Once I flew over the Pentagon, which I didn't even think you were allowed to do. But I was flying out of the airport in Washington, Reagan? Is it Reagan? And just off the runway and like bank left, and beneath you is the freaking Pentagon. That's pretty wild. And Vegas from the air at night looks really freaking cool. And I flew over Niagara Falls once, like right over it on a clear day. And that was pretty cool to see. So I've seen some neat stuff from the air. And I had to break this down. It's like, what is the coolest thing I've seen? And I got three, all right? Three that I will give you in order from bottom to top, all right? The third coolest thing that I've seen from the air is Greenland. Oh yeah, kids, Greenland. Flying back from Europe, one of the Sarah tours, don't remember which one, but the timing was such and the visibility was such and our route of travel was such that we flew over Greenland. And so I could look down and it was a clear day. You don't always get that on the plane. And look down, and I could just see Greenland for however long it took us to go by, which took a while. Greenland is not small, and it was just wild to be able to see that. I don't expect to ever visit, but as global warming continues, they'll probably be building metropolises there in a few years. Greenland, pretty freaking cool. The second coolest thing I've ever seen from the air was when I was flying to Japan. Either flying to or flying back. I think I was flying to. And we were over the Pacific. Again, clear day. Caught myself a clear day in the afternoon. And so I'm at the window seat. Used to be a window seat guy. Now I'm more of an aisle seat guy because I need bathroom access. I'll go to the bathroom. This is perhaps TMI. I'll go to the bathroom like 10 times on a flight because I don't know why. But I hate the notion of being stuck in the window seat and needing to get out and climb over some poor people like 10 freaking times. Don't want to do that. Don't want to upset people. Don't want to be a nuisance. Want to be a good neighbor. So I like the aisle seat now. But I used to sit at the window seat. And I'm looking out at the Pacific. And you don't know. You don't understand how enormous the ocean is. How enormous the world is until you have that kind of 30,000 foot perspective. And so I'm just looking out the window and all you can see for as far as your eyes will go is water. And if you kind of duck forward and look to the other side of the plane, you can see just a little bit out that window over there and it's just water. And I'm thinking, man, it's so vast. How deep is it? How much memory is contained therein? And then, as we're flying along, I look down and I see just a little boat. Just a little boat like a Lego boat, like a toy boat. And I realized that it's one of these ocean-going oil tankers or a cargo ship. One of those boats that when you see it up close, you're like, we make things this big? It's incredible. You know, I've come into Hamburg several times to play gigs there. Hamburg, Germany. Big, big, big port. Just rows and rows and rows of cargo ships. And you drive by them like, what? How would we make things this big? And then you are flying over the Pacific and you look down and you see one of these boats that's like an inch. It's tiny. And you see it against the vastness of the ocean. And you realize how tiny we are, and how deep and how wide and how powerful the ocean is. And it was just profound for me. It was profound to see that, to see it against the vastness of the ocean, and just realize the power of nature, the size, the sheer size of nature. And that tripped me out, man. And I still remember it. And it's the second coolest thing I've ever seen from the air. But the number one thing, the coolest thing that I've seen from the air, also, it was the flight coming back from Japan. So Japan was important for me and my memories. We're flying back. We left from, I don't know if we left from Nagoya or Osaka. It doesn't matter. We're flying. And again, our route of travel to Vancouver took us on such a route that we're flying through the clouds, and then in the distance, emerging from those clouds, was Fujisan itself. Mount Fuji, man, probably the most famous mountain on Earth. I mean, everybody knows about Everest, but could you pick Everest out of a lineup? I couldn't, you know? If we cut them all off at the same height, I couldn't pick Everest out of a lineup. But I think you would recognize Mount Fuji, and it is so symbolic of Japan. It is Japan's Eiffel Tower. You know, when you think of Japan and landmarks, what comes to mind is Mount Fuji. And it's the same way that when you think of Canadian landmarks, you think of the Montreal Forum, right? We're flying along, and out of the mist emerges Mount Fuji. And we just silently glided past it. And I'm like, I'm seeing Mount Fuji right now. It's right there. And it was, without a doubt, the coolest freaking thing I've seen from the air. And we went past it, and I'm like craning my neck for every possible second of vision that I could have of Mount Fuji. It was amazing. So freaking cool, man. So I'm delighted to say I've seen Mount Fuji. I flew right past it, and that's the coolest thing, Wes S., that I've seen from the air. Got a question from our old friend Nick Ross. Not the first time he has asked me this, and I still don't have a good answer. But Nick said, if you were to start writing a book tomorrow, what would it be about? And I don't know. I mean, writing questions are loaded for me. Those of you who are podcast veterans know about my struggles with writing. Know that my goal at one point in life was to be a fiction writer. And I dedicated 10 years of my life to that, and it went bust on me. I have not quite given up the dream entirely, but things have just shifted a little bit, you know. But it brings up kind of bad feelings for me to think about writing, and it brings up pangs, you know. It brings up this sense of unfinished business. It brings up a sense of perhaps a gift wasted. And it hurts me sometimes still to think about it, you know. And I don't have a good answer to the question. If I had a good answer to the question, what would I write a book about? I'd write a freaking book. I still have some ideas. I still have a couple of things related to the First World War that I would like I did so much research on this idea that I've got for a novel about that. And it's kind of overwhelming. And this is the thing. I mean, this is what I will say. I don't know if I'll ever write another book. Maybe. I hope so. It would be nice. Who knows? But in a lot of cases, it's just a matter of beginning. It's the same as anything else. Starting a podcast, starting a band, whatever. Picking up an instrument, picking up a language, playing pickleball. It's a matter of beginning. And what I found as a writer when I was doing that and when I was dedicated to it is that usually I would start with an image in mind or a sentence, one or the other, just a scenario, an image, a sentence. And I would begin with that, and then things would begin to open up. I made it to the end. I made it to the final page several times. And it's interesting to me how much, in a certain sense, the books wrote themselves. If you are in the right headspace, if you're approaching it with the right humility and with interest and curiosity and sort of a positive feeling, creatively positive, even if it's a sad book or a negative book, a positive approach to it, it does tend to come through you. Now, my supply has been somewhat choked, and that's my own fault, and it's something that I'm still working through. But in a lot of cases, it's hard to say, especially as a novelist. I think I'd write a book about this. It's not really like that, for me at least. It's kind of, I've got this image, or I've got this sentence, and I don't know where that's going. And what's really cool is what will open up sometimes. Even the bits of work that I've done, which are what they are, had really cool stuff in them that I never saw coming. I couldn't have planned that. It came out through the writing, and I have, to a certain extent, choked that off and caused myself a lot of grief about it. And I have a sort of creative PTSD, I guess, that I inflicted upon myself, This is self-inflicted writer's block, and then I don't know. There's a certain amount of stamina required, and I have not come full circle on that process. But it's hard to say what I would write about, because you just need, for me, as a fiction writer, just a little bud, just a little kernel that pops over time, So I can't really say, Nick, got a couple war ideas that I think are worth exploring. I just am not in the right creative space to do it. At least not today. Who knows about tomorrow? So sorry, Nick, that's not a very satisfying answer. I will say that I would like to write again if I can ever get my freaking head together to do it. So there you go. Want to do a few music questions? Dan the Man Cunningham, Galactic Cowboys fan, listener of Monty's Rockcast, all around good egg, asked me a question that's the hardest question I've probably ever been asked. And I don't even have a good answer to it as I'm about to answer it. Dan the Man Cunningham said, if you only had 3, what 3 albums would you say define you? And instantly, I have in front of me the blue screen of death. Like, I think about it for 2 seconds, and then my sort of internal computer just clicks off. What 3 albums define me? What do you mean? What do you mean? Define me as a music listener? Define me as a human being? Define me as a drummer? Define me when? Define me as a teenager? Define me now? I don't know. And I've spent probably a very inordinate amount of time trying to come up with the quote-unquote right answer to this question. What 3 albums define me? I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm delighted to tell you that 3 albums, at least as a music listener, 3 albums don't give me enough space. Back in high school, that wouldn't be such a tough assignment, all right? There'd be an arena rock album, there'd be a glam metal album, and probably a thrash album, all right? That's me, as a music listener at least. But as I have matured, as I have snuck up upon this milestone of 50 years on this spinning planet, my tastes have become more diverse. My palette, as it were, has become wider. And so I cannot choose 3 albums that encapsulate me as a music listener. I cannot pick 3 albums that give you the full picture. So what I've had to do, it's like, is it 3 albums that define my playing? Would that be 3 albums that I played upon? I don't know. I could give you my drumming style in 3 songs, but I'm not going to do it because nobody asked. I can't give you 3 albums that define me. I can give you 3 albums that I might submit as what I listen to, generally speaking. I would have to begin with a King's X record. That would probably be Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. And the problem is that King's X is a genre unto themselves. They aren't representative of anything, except maybe rock. You know? Back in the day, I would have said, well, okay, Dirty looks cool from The Wire. That's your kind of glam thing. And then probably Believers of Sanity Obscura, which is like a thrash thing. Very specific to genre, or a Megadeth record, or a Galactic Cowboys record that spans genres in a way, gives you clues, but that forces people to think about what I'm trying to tell them, you know? King's X, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, Sarah Harmer, probably All of Our Names. You can pick any Sarah Harmer record. I'm picking All of Our Names because it has Tether on it. Tether is my favorite Sarah Harmer song, and this is what I'm talking about as an example of divergence. In the 90s, my palette opened up. I encountered, initially, artists like Indigo Girls through my spouse or significant other. And then eventually along comes your Sarah Harmers, and it just clicked with me. I was at a point of time and a point of maturity whereby this music began to speak to me. And so you could pick any Sarah Harmer album you like. They are all representative. I'm picking All of Our Names. And that is your acoustic folk rock style. Americana, I guess, kind of style. Which is what I play best as a drummer, and so it makes a certain amount of sense. Sarah Harmer's All of Our Names. The other record I would have to pick is A Deeper Understanding by The War on Drugs. And that is representative to me of not just probably my favorite band right now, apart from King's X, along with maybe Ghost. It's the indie rock, art rock kind of thing. I could have chosen a Weaker Than's record. I could have gone all the way back and chosen an Archers of Loaf record from the 90s. This is a whole other facet. You know, I was a rock guy, and then I blossomed into the Americana thing, into a little bit of alternative country, into the indie rock thing, and that doesn't even cover the big band stuff. That does not cover the swing stuff. You know what I mean? There are layers, there are levels. I am an onion, like an ogre, you know? So it's very, very tough to define yourself in 3 records. But if I had to say, this is the sort of stuff I listen to, I guess, King's X, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, Sarah Harmer, All of Our Names, The War on Drugs, A Deeper Understanding, and some thrash metal. And some big band music, and some classical. I like Vivaldi. Love me some Vivaldi, all right? That's a tough question, Dan the Man Gunningham. And there are so many different ways to approach it. But I'll give you those 3 for now, okay? Philly Pat. Philly Pat. So named because he is the world's biggest fan of the Philadelphia Flyers. He's also the world's biggest fan of the old-time rock and roll band AC/DC. Philly Pat says, hey, wouldn't it be cool if AC/DC did one last tour with all 3 drummers, Phil Rudd, Chris Slade, and Simon Wright, playing together at the same time? One asks himself whether Phil Rudd would allow that or order a contract on those other 2 guys. Just kidding. As far as I know, he was exonerated. Phil Rudd, I mean, come on, man. Phil Rudd is part of my lineage. Ringo, Charlie Watts, Phil Rudd, these dudes who hold down the pocket, these dudes who keep it simple, these dudes who provide the freaking foundation. Love me some Phil Rudd, man. And it is not easy to do what Phil Rudd does. It is not easy to cop that feel, man. I mean, you can play technically the notes, but his particular swing, his particular feel is very signature. I mean, everybody's got a signature, man. I'm going to get to some of this later in my own case, I think. Phil Rudd has that signature vibe, and to have all 3 of those cats on stage together, why not? Why not, Philly Pat? I think that would be cool to see. What would be even better, which would be amazing, is if we could have a seance and have Bon Scott And Malcolm Young back too. That's a show, man. But sure, man, why not have all three drummers on stage? I think that'd be pretty freaking cool. Let's bring Axel too. What the hey? Got one from our old friend Corey of Collective Evolution, great supporter of the program. As always, he asked me another one that I can't really answer. And he's like, if somebody died and put you in charge of the music industry, what one thing would you do to fix it? How much time have you got? I don't even know. I mean, I do not work at the industry level. I mean, I'm very much in the indie world, and that is its own kind of entity. I can look at the music industry as a whole. That's kind of a clever pun. I can look at the music industry as a whole. A lot of artists would agree with that. But I don't know. I don't know much about the inner workings of the game in terms of labels, in terms of distribution, in terms of where the money goes and who gets it. I was looking into this and I learned that Spotify has never once turned a profit. Everybody's jumping on Spotify as the ender of the music business. They've never turned a profit, and that's weird, isn't it? Now, apparently that's because Spotify has an outrageously bloated payroll, and that's sucking up all the money. It's certainly not going to the artists. We know that. And who knew? Who knew, right? So yeah, the music industry is freaking broken. The live music industry has been ravaged by the pandemic. Streaming has utterly gutted the business from the other side. Here's the deal, man. As soon as you attach the word business to something, you're getting into dicey territory because the game becomes not about the art or creating, or the music, or the artist. It becomes about the freaking money. Everything exists for profit. And once you begin to get into existing for profit, you begin to get into things being very the same, not taking a lot of risks. You know, in the old days, in the record label days, an artist, a band, would have 3 or 4 albums to break. You know what I mean? It's like we did the first one, didn't do great, let's move on to the next one. A label would, to a certain extent, nurture an artist to help them get to the next level. That doesn't exist anymore. Now, don't think this is me saying back in the 80s and 90s, it was golden times. It wasn't. Artists were getting screwed then too, because it's about profit. It's not about the art. It's about the profit. If I could change one thing, I would change this attitude to pull it away from profit and back into art. But businesses don't operate that way. And you don't get the 3-album cushion anymore. It's like if you have a single and it doesn't hit, you're done. That's it. We move on to the next generic thing we can plug out. And streaming platforms just want your eyes on the platform. They don't care about the music either. Spotify doesn't care about the freaking music. Spotify cares about your attention on their app. Just like Facebook, just like Instagram, just like TikTok. And so they will serve you up whatever it is that's generic and safe enough to keep you there. And then the pop world, how many pop songs have you heard that have the same kind of Latin soca beat? Dun, 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 dun. Every freaking song is the same. And the only thing they do to try to make it interesting is see how titillating they can make the lyrics. You know, it's lowest common denominator stuff because that's where, it sounds condescending to say so, but that's where the masses are. And that's where the money is. Just keep the attention on the freaking platform. Now you've got AI moving in. I mean, how do you fix all of this? I don't have a good answer to that, but somebody else does. Just the other day, I was on your social media platform, consuming the most generic stuff, and the great Tommy Igo, drumming icon, drumming education icon, posted up a link to a story, an article, a blog post by a cat called Ted Gioia, Gioia. And he has a website, honest-broker.com. And he blogs about the music business and music more generally. And he did something recently that he called an open letter to Taylor Swift. If anybody can save us, he surmises, it's Taylor Swift. And here's what he says. Given the lay of the land, given the state, this is still me talking, of the music industry where it is today, where it's been, and where it needs to go in order to be sustainable, he enlists, hopefully, the power of Taylor Swift, the most marketable and biggest and most powerful artist on the planet today. Some people would say Taylor Swift is a symptom, but you cannot deny her pull in this freaking game, man. Here's what he says towards the end of this open letter to Taylor Swift. The larger picture is crystal clear. We need and deserve a trusted organization that nurtures the musical culture, enlists the participation of the best creative artists of our time, and has direct distribution to the fans. That's key, man. Direct distribution to the fans. You need a product to sell. If there's nothing that people will buy, there's no money in the industry. Artists are not seeing the money from what's left that they have to sell. And this is still me talking too. All they got to sell is t-shirts and freaking vinyl. The venues want a piece of the t-shirts. And now you've got labels offering what they call 360-degree deals where they get a cut of everything, man. Didn't used to be that way. They used to pull back their advance on the albums. Right? You sell records. They would take their cut of a big, huge, most of the cut of those records, right? Because they paid you out in advance to make it. You got to make the advance back against your royalties before you start seeing a freaking penny. Now they want a piece of everything. They want your merch. They want your touring. They want your streaming. They want everything. What's left for the freaking artist? All right, Ted Gioia goes on. Instead of rewarding middlemen, it will reallocate cash to showcase and support artistry. The music will come first instead of last. Taylor Swift, you can create something better from scratch. You can bring together all of the best things about music into a single operation owned by musicians and run by people who love music, encompassing streaming, physical albums, and live music. You can create a unifying vision. You can build something that's fair and transparent and gets people excited about music again. Others will join you, and it can happen quickly. We need something that puts money back into the artist's hands to give them the opportunity to keep creating art and to fail. This is the other thing. It's just like I said, back in the old days, the label would give you an opportunity to fail. And they don't now. And so what you have to do is not create something unique, not create something that will stand the test of time, but create something that hits the algorithms and the metrics and sounds like the other thing that hit the algorithms and the metrics. There is no impetus to creativity. If you want to survive, you've got to be bland in a lot of ways. Sometimes bands break that mold. Ghost did it. Took them 10 freaking years. It's not sustainable for artists. How many do you know who can make a living? And you can't tour now in a lot of cases. It's the same problem that plagues our entire system. So much money collected by the very, very top 1%. That's you, Taylor. And nothing left for everybody else. Right? It's the same thing in literature. There is no what they call the mid-list anymore. Used to be your top tier, Stephen King, John Grisham, whatever. These cats were at the top of the game selling all the books. But there was a healthy mid-list. There was a healthy middle class of authors who did not have that profile, but were turning out good work and being paid for it to the extent that, book sales would do that for you. It doesn't really exist anymore. And so many artists in every industry, every genre, have to do it as a hobby because the money is not freaking there. So the money needs to be collected. There needs to be something that people will buy. Streaming has destroyed that, and there's no putting that horse back in the barn. It is gone. The perception now is that music is free and you don't pay people for it. And once that perception has taken hold, there's no getting it back. So where does the money come from? How is it generated? And how can it be distributed to everybody involved in a way that allows them to be artists? And I don't have a good answer to that, but as Ted Gioia says, maybe Taylor Swift does. I'm looking at it from where I'm at, and if you're ready to go out as an indie artist and play 200 or 300 shows a year, you can, I think, make a living. I've seen people do it. But man, what a risk that is. And I don't want you to shy away from the risk. I mean, if you have it in you and you have this burning desire Fresh Breath, who I play with, they're on the road all freaking year, and they love it. They have built their life in such a way that it works, and they make a living, and they travel, and they do what they love. And at the end of the day, what you love is what's best. At the end of the day, what you love is what's best. And you may not be able to make a full-time living of that, but it must be in your life in some way. And so you have to learn in whatever way to structure your life such that what you love is present in it. A lot of people get depressed. A lot of people get old because it's not. All right? They don't have time. They're at their freaking job and they don't have time for their real passions. And it hurts. It hurts to know that something's in you, that something is burning in you, that you cannot release because you don't have the wherewithal or the time or the ability because real life gets in the freaking way. Somebody said universal basic income. That comes with its own kind of dangerous stuff. But yeah, if everybody was receiving a basic income, they'd be less reliant on the job they don't want to do and theoretically able to open up to whatever artistry is in them. I don't want to go down that road because I'm not informed enough to say. Something needs to change, Corey, if artists are going to make money and make a living in music and therefore be able to continue experimenting. And we can get away from bland, boring pop music and horrendous bro country music that's all the same. I've been at parties recently where they're playing bro country, and I swear to effing G, it's the same damn singer on every freaking song. How do they all sound the same? Because this is what works for the market, and so we're going to all do exactly the same freaking thing with the same trite lyrics about blue jeans and cold beers and tractors and country roads, and we're going to all sound exactly the same, and the songs are going to all be exactly the same, and that's how you make a living in the game. The game needs to change to encourage experimentation and artistry, man. And I don't know how you do it, but I hope somebody smarter than me figures it out. Our old friend Pete Langer, one of the oldest friends in my freaking life. You know, we are both turning 50 this year, and I think we met when we were like 3 or something like that. Pete's been around a long time. He and I were first trumpets in the school stage band, the Ripper Trumpets, baby. Knocking them down, getting all the ladies as first trumpets in the school stage band. Also a musician, also a big AC/DC person, big Van Halen person, our old pal Pete Langer. Pete asked me a couple heavy ones, and we're getting into the heavy stuff now, man. Pete says, what have you learned about yourself from your drumming pursuits and from the podcast? And as a corollary, as a follow-up, how has that contributed to you still feeling 32? If you've been listening, you know I have this theory that nobody ages mentally past the age of 32, that you do not see yourself as older than 32, no matter how old you get. And that's why you get 68-year-old dudes hitting on 30-year-olds, which is grotesque and seems creepy until you realize that in his mind, he still thinks he's 32. You know, it's just, you don't age past that, especially if you stay in younger pursuits like, you know, music. What have I learned about myself from my drumming pursuits? Couple good things, couple bad things. One of the things I I knew this, but it was really brought to the fore. And music is a crucible, man. It will bring out your demons. Music will bring out the stuff in you that needs to be addressed. Anything will, really. Any pursuit that's hard will bring out of you what needs addressing. So what have I learned? I've learned just how little I value myself. Not so weird. When you weren't expecting that, were you? I learned throughout the past more than 10 years now, playing out and being in the industry and being in the scene, how little I valued myself. You know, in the early days, I had so little confidence in my playing that I turned down gigs. In the very, very early days, it's like, no, I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough drummer to go out and play. And if I go out and play, people are going to figure out, and I'm going to be embarrassed and humiliated. Even in the early days of Hearts, when we were playing shows and recording, I kept kind of looking over my shoulder, like, when is the shoe going to drop here? When are they going to figure out, these people, that I'm not a good drummer and I don't know what I'm doing? How long before I get replaced? I had this running through my head the whole time because I am not the flashiest or most technical player. This is not my game. It has never been my game. I'm more of a Phil Rudd guy. I'm more of a Ringo guy. Not to say that those cats don't have chops. It's just that they don't necessarily use them when they're playing the music, you know? They own their particular idiom. But I didn't have a lot of confidence in my idiom as I was starting out. And as I realized and I began to reflect on how inferior and how inadequate and how not good enough I felt all the time, not growing up, but living now in the social media age, when so much of Instagram is about nothing but blazing chops for 15 seconds, and it's all about chops, 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 and it's about gospel drumming, and it's about whatever it is, insane double bass, some of which is freaking triggered, and they don't tell you that. Or this technical thing, or that technical thing, or mine. You know what I mean? You grow up around that as a kid today, and you think that's what good drumming is. And in certain genres, it is. In certain contexts, it is. But it's not me. It's not me. And so I'm looking around at how great everybody freaking is in terms of their technical ability, how fast they can play, and the chops. I'm looking around at that, and I'm like, I'm not good enough. If this is the standard, I can't do any of that. The reason I can't, because I don't really want to. It's not interesting to me. I'm a pocket player. And what I learned through my drumming is that I have these biases against myself that need to be addressed. And over time they have been. And the other thing I learned, which is the other side of that, is that I do have value as a drummer. I do have value as a singer. I have value that I didn't recognize until I got into the scene and found the places where I fit, where I found the places where my style of drumming fits. And then I learned that I can write really interesting parts for things. Now, I have an ear for writing interesting parts, and I have good time, and I have a sense on stage of when to push and when to pull, and I can listen, and I can work with other musicians. I have talents. I have abilities that always need to be developed, but the basic parts are there. And it took me a long freaking time to begin to own what I do. You know, that was I did 5 lessons from 10 years in music a while back. One of my lessons is own what you do. Play how you play and have confidence in that. I can tell a good and confident drummer by the strength of his or her backbeat. When I see somebody sit down and hit that snare drum with real focus and real confidence, I'm like, yeah, that cat is comfortable in his or her own skin, has confidence and owns what they do. And I had to learn over time to own what I do. It made me a fragile player. It made me restrained. It made me reserved. And I realized that in the world I play in, which is a lot of Americana, which is a lot of folk, all those blazing chops don't fit, cat. They do not freaking fit. You know, you need to, in some ways, turn your weaknesses into your strength. From a certain perspective, my weakness is I'm not all that technical or choppy. And that's my strength, because I don't come in to play on your Americana song and freaking chop all over it. Flex all over it, as the kids say, which gets you freaking fired. All right? Come in, play the pocket, keep it simple. That is my freaking game. That's why I love Charlie Hall from the War on Drugs. Keep it simple, but play that simplicity with all the intensity you've got. And that has become my game. That has become my calling card. That cat over there holds a nice pocket, keeps it simple, won't get in your way, and sings nice backups. That's my game. That's my calling card. And I've learned to own that, and I've developed a confidence in my playing through that. That is my game. That's the biggest thing I've learned through the process of pursuing this career in drumming over the past decade plus. I learned that I have value. I learned that there are things that I do well, and I've learned to own what I do well. And if the gig requires something else, it's not my gig. End of freaking story. That's the existential part. You know, what is right for me will come to me. What is not right for me will go. That's what I've learned, Pete Langer, from my drumming pursuits. Podcasting. What have I learned from podcasting? That I'm a sucker for punishment? That I am a cockeyed optimist. And I like to hear myself speak. I think it was you, Pete Langer, who once wrote to me something to the effect of my inclination to action is impressive, meaning I do stuff. One of the things I guess that I've had solidified for me as a podcaster is that, yeah, I do stuff. I am willing to take a chance on things. I am willing to try. And that is not an unadmirable quality. Now, a lot of people talk about it. A lot of people talk about starting a podcast or writing a book or starting a band or whatever, training for a job, whatever. People talk the talk, do not walk the walk. And I stumble my walk a lot of the time, and my walk in many, many, many cases doesn't go anywhere, but I am willing to take the steps. So I guess I've learned as a podcaster, I'm willing to do that, and I'm willing to try stuff. Now, I've experimented with different types of episodes on here. I have had to learn the technology. I mean, this was all overwhelming to me. I'm not a technically minded person. Tech is not my strength, but I had to figure it out, and I had help from people to do that. And so, yeah, my inclination to action exists at least. And that's kind of the medium being the message, You can do stuff. Take a freaking chance. Put yourself out there, as I always freaking say. So I've learned that I have a certain amount of courage, I guess, that I'm willing to try stuff. Even if it doesn't work out, most of what I've tried has not worked out. I'm willing to at least give it a go. If I have a certain intuition, I follow it. I go for it, and to whatever end. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned. Just that I have a certain amount of courage. I've never felt like a courageous person. All right. I have enormous fears of everything. But here I am, like a maniac, talking to myself in my freaking jam room with the insane notion that somebody might actually want to listen. Isn't that nuts? Maybe I've learned that I'm nuts. Or a complete narcissistic a-hole. I'm not sure which, but I had an intuition that said start a podcast, and here we are. And I resisted it for many, 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 many years. For whatever reason, stuff that I've talked about before. How does all of this keep me feeling as though I'm 32? Well, music is, in many cases, a young person's game. The people I play with, some of them are in their 20s. Many of them are in their 30s. I exist to a certain extent in that space, in that cohort. That keeps me feeling as though I'm 32 because my peers are 32. Podcast thing, I don't know. I don't know if it's a hobby. I don't want it to be a hobby. I want it to be a freaking job. It is a pursuit, and pursuit is young. As I said on a recent episode, what ages you is not time. It is the lack of pursuit. If you're not chasing anything, if you're not going for anything, you just become stagnant. It's like water that doesn't move. You need to be going for something that it keeps you active, that keeps you engaged, it keeps you energized, and it's that energy that keeps you young. So pursuing this podcast to whatever end feels like I'm chasing something, then there's a passion involved, there's an energy involved. You need to keep your energy going, and the way to do that is to use it. Otherwise, it just becomes caustic in you, and it leaks out, and it's wasted. And so doing this podcast makes me feel young in that sense. Like I'm in the modern game. Podcasting is a modern thing. Becoming passé, some people say. But I'm doing what the kids are doing. I'm just not doing it on TikTok, all right? So there you go, Pete. I've learned that I have value. I've learned to own what I do as a player and be confident in that. And it's working, by the way. I'm hearing that from people. And I've learned that I am willing to take risks, and I have a bit of courage. And it keeps me freaking young doing all of that stuff. Now, before we get to the rest of the questions, I know this is turning into a bit of a long episode. I hope that's okay by you. It is, after all, an extravaganza. Before we go any further, I will quickly do the Patreon plug. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, there is a Patreon page for this podcast. It is patreon.com/John Huff Podcast, where for the low, low price of $5 a month, you can support the show. I do not want to do ads on the program. I do not like ads on podcasts. I find them intrusive, and I really dislike having to scroll through like 6-7 minutes of ads before we even get to the freaking episode. I find it irritating. It is terrestrial radio, man. You listen to your AM station, you get 5 minutes of programming and 5 minutes of freaking commercials. Drives me crazy. Do not want to do that to you. But in order to fund the work I'm doing here, I have opted to go with Patreon. If you are being inspired, motivated, educated, just like hearing a friendly voice in your ears once a week, please consider supporting via Patreon. It is the equivalent, as I always say, of tipping me $1.25 for every episode that I do. If you met me in the club and you thought I would buy a drink for that cat to say thanks for the work you're putting into this program, you can do so via patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. And thank you ever so kindly to those of you who have done that. Don't want to do that, can't do that, totally fine. The podcast will remain free and accessible where you enjoy fine podcasts. You can support by sharing the episodes. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on Facebook. John Huff Podcast. Tell your friends. Word of mouth is still the best advertising. You got people who like to listen to podcasts, want something perhaps a little bit different. Please do send them my way. Please share these episodes. And again, if you're looking for a last-minute birthday gift for your boy, a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform would warm my cockles to the nth degree. Takes 2 seconds to click 5 stars, kids. Takes 10 seconds to say, I like this show. I like what this guy is doing. I get whatever it is I get from it. You should consider listening to. Would make me feel real good. Doesn't cost you a dang penny. I want to thank you for your support. These 161 now episodes, they just keep accumulating, man, and that's the lesson. Incremental improvement over time. Small bits of work over time compiling into a larger whole. Hope you don't consider me a large whole. Thank you so much for your support. Patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. And please do consider it as we move forward into the next 5 decades of this show and whatever the hell it is I'm doing. Thank you so much for that. Let's get to the last round of questions here. We got some heavy ones. I know we just did a heavy one, but we're going to do some heavy ones from our old friend Carly Thomas herself. Good old Nashville Carly Thomas. She starts with a fun one. She says, hey, would you ever consider trying stand-up? As a sit-down player, I would find it difficult to stand up, I think. Or do you mean comedy? I sure loves comedy. Stand-up comedy, yeah. Yeah, if I had material, I would consider stand-up comedy. There was a moment in time when I really wanted to do stand-up, when I really wanted to be a comedian. There's a difference. There's a definition that needs to be expressed here. There's a difference between wanting to do comedy and wanting to be a comedian. Just like there's a difference between wanting to write and wanting to be a writer. One is an identity. One is an actual effort, you know? And I tried for a while to write material, and I really struggled to do it. I don't think my mind works the way a comedian's mind does. The comedians can take a thing or a story or whatever, and they know how to work it into punchlines, and they know how to work it into the way comedy is presented. And I just don't seem to have that. I'll be trying to write material, and I'd be reading it on the page, and it's like, this sucks. Now, I know so much of it is delivery, right? And what comedian do you know that doesn't have a unique, interesting, or funny voice? That's a delivery. They just have an idiom. I mean, Maria Bamford is my favorite comic on the planet, especially now that Billy Connolly is retired. Maria Bamford's voices are the whole freaking thing. Just brilliant. She's lunatic and brilliant. But even Louis C.K. has kind of a funny voice in a way, or Bill Burr, or whatever, you know, but they're also incredibly funny, intelligent people, and they know over 30 years of developing this practice how to write material. I do not know how to shape material. I can take a story and it's not funny. It's not funny to me. Other people have a way of making associations, and there's just a way that a comedian's mind works that my mind doesn't work. I can be witty. I can be droll. I can be dry in the moment. But I've never been able to actually write material that I could present that's funny. And I think comedians have a perspective. I think they have a frame of mind. I think they have a view of the world that informs how they do things. And I'm not sure I have one. I'm not sure I have a point of view, you know, or at least one that I'm confident in. I don't know. It's really weird to me, but I would do it. You know, I still have kind of a bucket list desire to front a band. I know that's not the same as doing comedy, but it is being more upfront and more visible than a drummer typically is. You know, my position in the band is very kind of hidden, kind of sheltered. You know, the running gag is that the drummer's never in any of the freaking photos because you can't see him back there, you know? So I'm not frightened of an audience. I'm not frightened of a microphone. I know I can be articulate. I just don't think I can be all that funny. And I would like to do it. You know, a little while back, I did an episode where I talked about this weird twist on the Desert Island game. The Desert Island game is, you know, what 10 records would you take with you on a desert island, or 10 TV shows or books or whatever. My Desert Island game was if you were stranded on an island with 200 people, let's say, and you were obligated to join a tribe of people, what tribe would you join? And so I ran through what the tribes might be in my head. All of my people on the island were artists. Which artist group do I sit with? And I was, in my mind, when I played out this mental fantasy, pretty much excluded by the comedians. Now, they sat in a circle with their backs to everyone. And, you know, comedy feels to me, and my interview with Nikki Bond, the comedian, kind of confirmed this for me. Comedy feels like a closed world. And you really have to earn your way into the circle. But once you're in the circle, you're in. And I just felt like, objectively looking at that circle, like I didn't belong there. I probably belong with the musicians. Not even the writers, but the musicians. I felt like that's my world. And there's no circle. It's just a chaos, but everybody's welcome, man. Comedy felt very closed. And I don't feel like I fit there. And that pains me a little bit, because anytime I go see like a theater level comic, I feel a pang. Like if you're out there and you're performing to 800 or 1,000 people and you're killing, I feel such a harsh pang because I want that. I want to do that too. What I don't want to do, and probably don't have the time to do, is the 20-year grind of doing 5-minute sets for 6 people at a pizza joint for 20 years until I get to that headliner status. I just don't think it's my natural inclination. Now, I am incredibly clever. I am extraordinarily funny in the moment, but actually translating that into written, prepared material, I just don't seem to have that talent. And it is a talent. I mean, it's a talent that to reach the highest level, like anything else, you have to develop. But the kernel has to kind of be there. And I just don't really feel like I have that. And it kind of hurts me. So yeah, I'd try it if I had any jokes to share. I don't at this point. Now, I don't know if I'll ever actually take the opportunity to try or not. Maybe. I'm not afraid of it. I just don't have anything funny to say. Carly gets a little heavier from here on in. And she offered me 2 questions that kind of dovetail. One of them is, what's the best advice I've ever received? And what's the best lesson I've learned? I presume life lesson. And these things go together really in an interesting way. I've talked about advice before. Way back on the Linda Linda's episode, I think. I talked about advices. Borrowed that from Arnold Schwarzenegger. What's the best advice I've received? I've received some really interesting advice from people that didn't know they were advising me. I once saw King's X in a theater outside of Detroit, and they always do a meet and greet after, and you get in line and you talk to them. And I came to the point where I was talking to the drummer, Jerry Gaskell, who has an amazing right foot. Some people just have a really great, powerful, fast foot. My foot sucks. It's the bane of my drumming existence. And despite my best efforts, I really struggle to improve it. It legit holds me back. That's my thing to conquer. So we're in line. I come to Jerry and I say, hey, Jerry, what's your best advice for playing the kick pedal? And he says, without a moment's thought, hit it with your foot. I've told this story before. He says, hit it with your foot. Now, it's a flippant joke from Jerry. It's just a joke from Jerry, but it is a profound piece of wisdom about not overthinking, right? Don't overthink, man. Just hit it with your foot. And my boy Clugger gave me a similar piece of advice on the golf course one time. Now, he was a great golfer, all right? He was a natural athlete, could play freaking anything and play it well. Made it look effortless, and so it was with his golf swing. So I'm a freaking hacker of the highest order, and I hit my tee shot into a fairway bunker, right? Not a place you want to be, kids, especially if you don't know how to hit out of a fairway bunker. And so I'm standing in this sand trap in the middle of the hole, right? And I don't know what to do. I'm standing there. I don't know what club to hit. I don't know how to hit this shot. How do you hit out of sand and make a useful shot in the middle of the fairway? And so I look at him and he's just waiting on me with his hand on his hip. And I look at him and I'm like, I don't know what to do here, man. And he says, without a moment's thought, just hit it. Just hit it. Stop overthinking, Jack. Just hit the freaking ball. And so I took out a club and I hit the freaking ball, and the shot was probably lousy, but I was out of the trap. And that is profound advice. Hit it with your foot. Just hit it. Stop overthinking. Don't think yourself into a kind of paralysis, which is what I tend to do and a lot of people do. So those were good advices, but they weren't the best advice. The most profound advice that I carry with me everywhere I freaking go, and it dovetails into what's the best lesson I've learned. So also Clugger was Troy, all right? Now, he is no longer with us, okay? He left his body in 2010. But his advice to me, not just the golf course thing, but his advice to me one night in Allenford, Ontario, at the baseball diamond, hangs with me to this freaking day. Now, a bunch of my friends were in a fastball league. One year I joined the fastball league, and I was an okay baseball player. Not great, but not terrible. Couldn't hit the ball to save my freaking life, but I was not a bad player. He was a great player. Of course he was a great player. He was great at freaking everything. And we didn't play on the same team, but it's the first game, and he came to watch because he knew a bunch of people on my team and whatever. And he was in the league on a different team. Little scouting mission. And so I step up to the plate, my first at bat in this league, and it's fastball, man. The ball's coming hard. People are throwing some smoke. And okay, I take my stance in the batter's box, but I'm a little bit off the plate. Or a little bit hesitant, a little bit off the plate. And so I'm in my stance, and the pitcher's getting ready to throw the ball. And I hear this voice behind me on the other side of the chain link screen. He's standing right behind me. And I hear his voice say, "Stand in there, Johnny. Stand in there, Johnny. Get closer to the plate. Get over the plate. Step in. Don't be hesitant. Step into this, man. Stand in there. Have courage. Have confidence." That's not what he was saying to me, but he was. Without saying so, he was saying so. And I've carried that with me everywhere I've gone from that day forward. When I have stepped up to any kind of challenge. When I played with you, Carly, not headlining, but on Friday night or whatever it was at Home County. And we got 2,000 or 3,000 people in front of us. Stand in there, Johnny. When I was a practice teacher, walking up to the front of a high school class for the first freaking time, with my palms sweating, vomit on a shirt already, mom's spaghetti. Stand in there, Johnny. Anytime that I go and do anything that's intimidating to me, and a lot of stuff is intimidating to me, I have that voice in the back of my head. Stand in there. He's gone now, but that remains. And I give it to all of you. Not for the first time, because I've told this story before. But that's the best piece of advice I ever got. which is to stand in there. If you're doing anything intimidating to you, stand in there. Have a bit of confidence in yourself. Live, damn it. Step into what it is you want to do. Whatever you're trying, do it for freaking real. Have some confidence. Have some belief in yourself. Have some faith in the freaking universe and stand in there. Stand up to be counted. Do it with all you've got. As a drummer, I have to do this all the time. Have faith in my ability. Have some confidence in my ability to stand in there. Take your freaking swing, man. Take your shot. And I say that to people now. I say that to you, whatever it is that you're contemplating doing, whatever it is that you're frightened to do, whatever you're intimidated by, stand in there, kids. Stand in there because of the best lesson that I've learned, which is, do I even need to freaking say it at this point? Good things happen when you put yourself out there, man. Do not hide your light under a bushel, kids. Good things happen when you put yourself out there. That's the best lesson I've learned, Carly. It's been, especially the last 10 years, this kind of sequence of projects, stuff that I've taken on, whether that's playing with different bands or starting my music blog or starting this podcast or going on the road, whatever. Taking a freaking chance on yourself, right? Good things happen when you put yourself out there, when you are willing to be seen, when you are willing to fail, when you put your art into the world, when you put yourself into the world, doors open. This podcast exists right now. I know you, Carly, because I put myself out there as a drummer way, way, way back in like 2011. So much of my life as it is now and my experience and the people who are in it are the product of music and the music world. And it all comes from putting yourself out there. That's it. I mean, that is the best lesson I've learned. And you can have confidence in yourself, and it's okay to fail, man. Fail all the freaking time, man. This is where growth comes from. And nobody cares freaking anyways. Good things happen when you put yourself out there. I am the living proof of that. So many incredible things have come my way as a product of just being willing to put myself out there and be visible and take a freaking chance and fail. And it doesn't always go your way. That is freaking life. But if you sit on what you've got, and if you do not take a shot with it, you'll never know, will you? And if I never play Wembley Stadium, which is on my bucket list, okay. But so much of my life is the product of having put myself out there as a musician, as a writer, as a blogger, as a podcaster. And it's the same for everybody, whether you're dating people or whatever it is you're trying to pursue. Good things happen when you do it, and you can't see them coming. I didn't see Carly coming when I started playing with Hearts. I didn't see this podcast coming. I didn't see Europe with Sarah coming. It's all the product of putting yourself out there, and you just do not know. You just do not know where a simple decision will take you and the positive results it can have. My whole life is utterly changed. Utterly, from the decision to put myself out there as a drummer, the terrifying decision to do that against the feelings of inadequacy that I felt and this fear of being found out. Turns out I'm okay, and you are too, and you will be, and you'll grow and you'll have experiences that when you come to the end of your life, you'll look back and say, wow, I did that. I experienced that as a product of being courageous enough to step through the fear and put myself out there. I promise you rewards. They may not be financial, but experiential rewards await on the other side of putting yourself out there. That's heavy, right? There's one I forgot to do for my old pal Nick. Nick the drummer, Nick E. Fabulous freaking drummer. Nick who said, what have you learned? A lot of learning questions. And I like that. I'm reaching this age where I ought to have some wisdom to match the silver hair. You know what I mean? Nick says, what have you learned from being part of a music community? What is the most valuable lesson you've learned from being part of a music community? And that's one that you have to kind of think about just a little bit. Not what have I learned from being a musician necessarily, or about being a musician necessarily, but from the community, what have you learned? The biggest lesson I've learned, Nick, is that for the most part, people in the music community are great. People in the music community are supportive, they are friendly, they are willing, they are encouraging, they are nice. You know, what you hear is all of these ego stories. And yeah, you do encounter that along the way. But in my experience, 90% of the people in the music scene are just great people. Really open, willing, encouraging people. And brilliant, and artists, and willing to share, and willing to help. You know, most of the time when you play an indie show in your local town, the people who are in the audience are also members of the local scene. You know, the way that I have seen other bands, I've seen bands and artists support each other along the way and go to the shows and share clips and whatever. You know, there's this really great community happening. That's why I talk about in the Desert Island game. I feel like if you go hang out with the musicians in that tribe, it's just wide open chaos, man. Everybody's welcome. Comedy feels like it's more closed. You got to earn your way in that way. And I think it's really competitive. It's really individual. But nobody has a better time than a group of comedians. Even if you're only allowed to observe it from afar, you know what I mean? Like once you're in that circle, it's tight, you know? Music, I feel, is wide open because it has to be. You know, you play on a show, it's a 4-band night. You've got to share gear. Even if you don't know the other bands, you've got to share gear. It's just part of the game. The whole nature of the thing is collaborative. And if you're not a collaborator, and if you're a dick, you're not going to be able to be part of the scene. What do they always say when approaching a potential gig? You got the money, you got the music, you got the hang. You got to have two of the three. And the hang is a vital part of the equation. And so I think music attracts people who tend to be very open. And I think it encourages people to be collaborative together. You have to work together to have a scene or you won't have one. And that's my lesson. You know, there's a bit of ego. There can be attitudes among certain people and they don't last. They don't hang around long. You know, if there's a band that's a group of dicks, they don't wind up on shows because nobody wants to hang. So that's my lesson. You know, that's what I've learned. The most valuable thing is that people are great. People are freaking great in the music scene, in the music community. It's a great and inspiring and encouraging and a welcoming freaking place to be. Man, that is a great thing. I had it happen on the weekend. I played with Fresh Breath last weekend, and I'm backlining the drums because we're headlining the show, but I'm talking to the drummer, Brian, from one of the other bands on the bill, and we got to talking about gear because we're drummers. We got talking about what we play and what we like and cool stuff. And Brian says, hey, you know, I got a Black Beauty snare. And I'm like, what? Black Beauty, a Ludwig Black Beauty snare drum is considered the creme de la creme. I mean, it is the iconic snare drum, a Ludwig freaking Black Beauty. And they are very expensive and can be very, very tough to find because if you got one, you ain't giving it up. You got a freaking Black Beauty. It is such a rare beast that I've never played one. Never played one. And so Brian says, I've got a Black Beauty snare. I'm like, oh, dude, that's amazing. And it's like a vintage, like from the 70s or something. A real deal Ludwig Black Beauty. That is a unicorn, man. Sweet. And I'm like, that's amazing, man. I would love to hear that. And he's like, well, I have it with me. What? I have it with me. Do you want to use it tonight? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I've never met this dude. He doesn't know how I play. I don't know how he plays. A lot of times you're a little bit reluctant to let strangers play your gear. It's why typically a drummer will supply the drums, and then you will bring your own cymbals, pedal, snare drum, stuff that might break, stuff that we call appropriately breakables. If you want to know more about that, please hit up Carly Thomas. She'll tell you all about it. Normally you bring your own breakables because that way if you break them, they're yours, right? And you're not, you know, have some dude wailing away on your freaking cymbal that costs $350. Fine. But again, hey, do you want to play my snare? He didn't know me. He didn't know how I play. Do you want to play my freaking vintage Black Beauty snare tonight? Yes, I do. And thank you very kindly. This is what I'm talking about in terms of the openness and the collaboration and the encouragement and the cooperation between musicians. That is the scene. That's what I've learned about the music community. Great people, by and large, generous, helpful, lovely. And it's a great scene to be a part of. And if we land on a freaking desert island someplace, I will proudly go hang with the musician tribe, man. Two more real quick ones. Let's end with a bit of frivolity. Let's end with a bit of fun, shall we? Our old pal Jay says, hey, cake. Cake, chocolate or vanilla? Dude, I'll take both. I am an equal opportunity cake person. Give me a white cake with vanilla icing and a bit of strawberry. I am a happy freaking camper. But if I had to choose, Nerf gun to my forehead, I'm a chocolate guy. I will go chocolate 10 times out of 10, but that doesn't mean I won't eat white cake if it's on the menu, all right? Thank you, Jay, for that. And the last question belongs to Fresh Breath. Our record is coming out in November. We are doing a CD release show November 11th in Kingsville. Follow Fresh Breath on your socials to get the details on that. Going to be great. Really excited about this record. I'm really pleased with it. I'm honored to have played on it. Great music by some really lovely people. Again, this is the music community, man. Josh and Katie, Ken, Brett, lovely, lovely human beings and artists. And it's my privilege, my honor to feel worthy, to be worthy in their eyes of playing this music with them. Having said that, Fresh Breath says to me, what will be your go-to cocktail to cheers your 50th birthday? My go-to cocktail on that occasion, I can speculate, will be a rum mojito. I will cheers with a rum mojito, but we all know that my libation of choice is red wine, and I love myself a wine from Washington State. Dude, back off California, go just a little bit north, a little bit cheaper, lovely wines from Washington State. Although a California Merlot is it's gonna do it for me, you know. But then I got into Chiantis. When we went to Italy last year. Spent a day or two in Tuscany, was able to sample some of the local product. And man, do I now love myself a Chianti. I never really went for medium-bodied wines. So I was always a full body guy. Like, give me a big cup of grog like they have in those fantasy movies, you know? Stuff that pours down your chin, really thick. I like that. Give me a California Cab Sav or a Merlot. I will go for that. Give me a Zinfandel, also known as Primitivo, by the way. But then I got into this lighter-bodied Chianti stuff, and I really, really like it. Gives you the vapors. Don't get me started on the wines. I will toast my birthday with a rum mojito. Later, I will enjoy the best wine I can get my hands on because I am now a silver fox. Very, very freaking sophisticated. This is a long episode. If you have hung this far, I thank you ever so kindly. I thank you in advance for the birthday wishes I will have received by now. This is some Terminator stuff, man. I'm doing time travel here. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, as ever, for being interested at all in this little program and this little host. I'm going to shutting up, as they say. Really Good things happen when you put yourself out there. So please do it. And please tell me you're doing it. I want to know what you're up to, man. I will be back next week with something just a little bit older, just a little bit wiser. Until then, many, many happy returns, and I'll check you later. Yeah. Wasted away again in Margaritaville. Not a big margarita guy, but thought we should pay a little bit of tribute to Jimmy Buffett. Is it bad to sing happy birthday? I'm just going to leave that for now, okay? Thanks a lot, kids.